Today's webinar is hosted by Women in Manufacturing. WIM is a national trade association that encourages the engagement of women who have chosen a career in the manufacturing industry. The association supports a network of more than 3,700 individuals from more than 900 companies. Today's webinar is made possible by Arconic Foundation, supporter of the WIM 2019 Virtual Learning Series. The mission of Arconic Foundation is advancing STEM education and skills training worldwide, with a special emphasis on engaging and creating access for underrepresented and underserved groups. This webinar on creating a better workplace culture will feature Kimberly Dyer. For over 25 years, Kimberly has been obsessed with continuous improvement. Over that time, she has helped several organizations define their vision, create structure, and develop their strategy to ultimately realize their goals. Kimberly is a professional entrepreneurial operating system implementer who helps entrepreneurs and their leadership teams continuously improve every aspect of running businesses. I will now turn it over to Kimberly to start today's presentation.
Good afternoon, everyone. Lisa, thank you so much for the introduction. It's a pleasure to be spending my afternoon with all of you. So the topic for today, which brought you all here, is creating a better workplace culture. A couple of things I want to cover at the beginning is the basic questions is what is culture? And today's webinar will hopefully help you determine what is your unique culture at your organization. I want to emphasize unique because it doesn't matter what someone else's culture is as long as it works well for your organization. Today we're going to be focusing on how to define and develop a positive culture. Why is culture so important to your organization? The downsides if you happen to have a toxic culture, and how to use your culture to, most importantly, attract, motivate, and retain your top talent. So let's begin. So the question is, what is culture? And again, I'd like you to be thinking about your specific organization. What do you think is the unique aspect of where you work? Then, why is culture so important? Think about your first day at your organization, how you were welcomed, how you were onboarded, how you have learned all the tribal stories of what's been successful, what you've learned has not been successful, and why is this still important for where you are today? So let's go look at how do we define culture. Our friends at Harvard Business School define it as how culture socializes our members, guides behaviors and values, manifests in our messaging, language, and storytelling. But as you can see, one of the most important parts I've highlighted in the orange part is it dictates our attitudes about what is right and wrong. Now, most of us would believe that's more of our personal beliefs, but in your own industries, you know your way of doing things, whether it's been passed along by tribal stories and by management or something that's been created in your own personal processes. It's how you define how it is you do things, your policies and your practices. Continuing on with what Harvard has taught us, how do you start to build a positive culture? Well, let's hope that you have one to begin with, but if not, let's take a couple of steps about who actually is responsible and what exactly will it look like. What you can see in the highlighted paragraph is that developing organizational cultures requires more than just talking about it. What I'd like to pause with is when you think about culture in your organization, what I hope is not present is just simple posters on a wall, because while that's a nice first step, that doesn't define who your team is, how things get done, who you're attracting onto the team, and more importantly, how you get things executed daily. So we have to go back and ask about key tasks and who understands the importance of aligning your organizational strategies and decision-making around these ideals. It really, think of it this way, it becomes a lens by which you pass all of your decision-making. Moving on, we think about how organizational culture will then significantly influence the performances and effectiveness of people. Think about your own personal experiences when you've got a positive culture. People have a more effortless view of how they're getting their work done. And the bottom part we're going to talk about is how we're attracting and motivating and retaining talented people. For those of you on the webinar today who may be in the HR seat, you probably have had one of the more difficult years in the last 2 years because of the 3% unemployment. How are your great stories, compelling visions, and wonderful cultures, attracting and retaining the people that you most need to bring on to your next goals. So we talk about breaking it into both performance, effectiveness, productivity, and again, that last key area of how to attract, motivate, and retain the talent. So if we go back to the other side of this coin, what are the costs of a negative culture? We find that there is more waste. And for those of you in the actual manufacturing field, it's not just a tangible waste on the shop floor, but it's waste of human energy, which is a very expensive commodity. You have a problem with lack of engagement. In a few slides, we'll talk about how discretionary energy amongst employees is an area that's another measurable of waste. When an employee is not fully engaged, you're losing that opportunity to have a higher level of productivity, as well as keeping them motivated. The third bullet point we talk about is chronic stress or burnout. This is an incredibly expensive area of negative cultures. And the more obvious is when you experience employee turnover. So those organizations that have strong, positive cultures can eliminate these 4 areas. Across the United States, US employees have this type of information that's available to us from last year, or the year prior. So where the 13% is actively disengaged, we talked about how those employees who have that discretionary energy to do their job, to execute on their roles, this becomes a bigger point when over 50% are disengaged with their roles. How does disengagement really take place? Typically, it's because of complacency, a lack of understanding, or a complete lack of accountability. So these are some areas that we found that do exist within organizations that have either poor or toxic cultures. When you do have a positive culture and a positive employment, where some of the indicators come across is when they have outperformed the S&P 500 because they are known as best places to work. Here in Northeast Ohio, we celebrate our top places to work by award season after award season of recognizing those employers that create positive cultures, that attract people, and want to keep them really happy employees as well as engaged employees. So when we talk about stress, the individual stress that takes place in toxic or less than positive cultures, companies with very stressful environments will see the following statistics: 376% less engagement. Just imagine looking across the platform at your organization and what that financial impact would be, what the productivity impact could be. An 87% increase in turnover. Again, for those of you who might be in the HR roles, how much more effort this would take in your specific role to have to replace each of those people that has left the organization. And finally, on this role is 22% decrease in work output. We all know that there are, if you look to the left and the right at your organization, you've got someone who's always busy. Well, busy certainly is real, but there's also, if they're not actually engaged, actively engaged, their output is not going to be at the same level. The graphic I've included on this slide talks about the 3 areas of the impacts of stress. You have the exhaustion, the physical and mental exhaustion. You have the futility. This is where cynicism starts to grow. And when you have cynicism, you won't have an authentic engagement factor. And last, on the bottom, you'll see avoidance. This is where an employee intentionally distances themselves. This is where you'll start seeing absenteeism. For those of you who have noted, when someone is chronically late, chronically missing from their desk, or always seems to be less than productive, this is an avoidance that's part of an impact of stress. So some simple areas to think about if you are experiencing this yourself to get clarity on your role. If you have direct reports that you believe have this, is to start addressing some of the areas that you may be most helpful with. No one wants to be the guy at the top of this picture, but when you do have problems, it's not a matter of when, but if. Cultures that have stressful environments will have the following. This is where typically they have a lack of clear purpose. How can you prevent this? It's simply outlining to every direct report what is it their role is expected to deliver, Do they understand the expectations? Is there a time frame? In other words, when is something due? And what does success look like? Making sure that both you and your direct reports clarify that understanding so that there's no lack of clear purpose. When there are few opportunities to grow, what we're finding more often is that there's a sense of complacency and helplessness, that it's just a job that you show up and collect a paycheck for. Well, if we really want to get employees to be engaged, we have to show them that there are opportunities. We have to give them an understanding of what may be a new opportunity within the organization. Lackluster leadership. Now, this is where, depending on your role in the organization, you may be witnessing it from your position, or you may be the one who's demonstrating it. Lackluster leadership becomes quite toxic because there's an opinion amongst the rest of the team that there's an exception made. In other words, do as I say, not as I do. And so we always want to make sure that leadership is always walking the walk and talking the talk, demonstrating and executing on what is expected. Poor well-being and no appreciation are two areas that typically don't cost very much for organizations to recognize. And so we talk about how to build around a less stressful environment and eliminate some of those toxic is to really remember to appreciate and connect with your employees and begin recognizing each of their accomplishments in a more timely fashion. In other words, don't wait for the end of the year to say, hey, you did a great job. Let's move on to what Inc. magazine has found with regard to why employees are leaving. Inc. states that you must guard against toxicity or your employees will quit. There's countless examples now where someone with a highly skilled background is actually choosing a lesser position in an organization because of pay, flexibility, or culture. What Inc. went on to find is employees have stated they leave because there is more value for the company versus the company's values. That then begs the question, do your companies have values? Do you know what they are? Does everyone share them? Again, we were talked about how leadership must demonstrate superior examples. And in this case, they noted it was reprehensible behavior from a leadership team member was why an employee left. An absence of accountability. I'll talk about this a bit further in the webinar, but accountability is one of the #1 areas to help grow a strong and healthy culture. When there is insufficient investment in people, the 4 areas, the 4 T's, if you will, are insufficient investment in time with a direct report, giving them managerial support and leadership support. Training. If they're being asked to execute on a role, are they fully trained on the latest ability to do so? Tools. This can mean anything from a specific type of computer program or to a physical tool on a shop floor. A person cannot effectively execute on their role without proper tools. And the 4th T is technology. Is what they're using in compliance? Have we upgraded everything so that it gives them the greatest chance for success? And last, was the final reason employees noted they leave was a lack of diversity and inclusion. Oftentimes we look at the mirror and don't recognize that the people working around us don't look like us and think like us, but they are just equal contributors to the total and overall success of the company. So now that I've pointed out some problems with toxic or negative environments, what can your organization do? A couple of solutions to start with. First, provide your employees with a meaningful purpose that inspires them. So what this means is you've got a great compelling story for each of your organizations. It's the why your company exists, why some people roll to work every morning ready to get going, rolling up their sleeves and showing how much they really care about the end results. Second, show how their work makes a difference by recognizing their accomplishments and sharing stories of success. One of the areas of advice I offer clients with regard to recognition is always, when appropriate, recognize your team members, your direct reports publicly, when especially it's in support of a goal, whether it is a quarterly goal, an annual goal, or when they've done above and beyond what your company wishes for them to demonstrate. Train each of your leaders to build trust and have interactions with their people. We're going to talk a little bit further about what trust means in a workplace environment. It's not just a transactional area. Then provide a sense of belonging and growth and connection with your teams. What does that mean? It's simply asking and making sure that people feel included, that their voice has been heard. How many times have you been in a meeting where someone is the only voice in the room talking and they haven't bothered to get input from others that may have some valuable cultural experience? And last is put employee well-being before the bottom line. Now, it's not just a trendy thing. Many companies are actually investing in the well-being of their employees because they know it'll be directly to the bottom line. The national company known as Glassdoor, which does all the evaluations of companies, has found what do employees value most, and it's not just about money. Here are some areas that Glassdoor reported on when they interviewed candidates as well as those employees who had left companies. The first was mission. Employees want to know what's the sense of purpose of coming into work. It goes back to the question of why does the company exist? They want collegiality. They really want to work with awesome people. No one wants to sit next to a grouch that's cynical. They want challenging work. Everyone wants to be stimulated by the work that's being done. Some of our work requires us to do very repetitive things and maybe some things that aren't very stimulating, but an environment that encourages us to be working about challenges is much more beneficial. Meaningful advancement is really showing them the pathway for progress. For those of you who are dealing with a younger workforce, you're going to be asked more and more to show them what is my career path, because they want to know they have one, because if they don't see a clear path ahead, they'll choose the exit. Confidence in senior leaders. Can't say this enough. Remember, it's about trusting the leadership team is exhibiting the proper behavior and has a sense of trust and transparency. More and more companies are being open about what their operations are like, and the more you share with the team, the more trust they can build. And last, this can't be avoided, their employees want perks. They want good pay, not exorbitant, but they do want good pay, occasional free food, flexible hours. And flexible should be noted that many companies are fearful of this because they feel like it means less work. We actually found that it's different work, different hours. Not every company and not every role can offer this, but it is something to figure out if it's possible. And last, yes, many employees asked for beer, and not every company can because of safety standards. But I thought it was worth mentioning. That's what Glassdoor has suggested. Let's move on to what are the first steps you can do if your company does have its culture and or its history or its why already well known. That's great. If not, identify what it is you think your actual culture is. What is it that is the most common themes, common attributes, common behaviors that you have with your top performers? Then gather some input. It can't just be a single source. And then ask yourself what needs to be fixed, because chances are you might have something that's not quite right, whether it's from a legacy system that hasn't been changed or the dreaded because we've always done it this way. And then when you're ready, ask yourself what needs to be initiated and when. Many companies decide to do big kickoffs to celebrate the history of a company through a benchmark, talking about announcing a new initiative as to where they are today, and then most importantly, start sharing the vision of where the company is going. Now what? To build a positive culture, you really need to foster an environment of collaboration. It's not just us telling them what to do. It's more of a we approach. Let's get everyone on board. Now you must then articulate the mission, the vision, and the values and expectations, not just once, again, not just a poster on the wall. What I say about the second point there is you need to be repetitive and consistent. So when you do talk about your vision of the company, whatever it may be, whether it's from your role or someone higher up in the organization, they need to be consistently delivering on progress as to where we are heading towards our vision. And third, you might need to anticipate some resistance and some roadblocks. When you anticipate them, it's much better than having to get them blindsided. Have a solution, be empathetic that not everyone's willing to start changing as fast as you are. Let them catch up to where you've been. Now, Patrick Lencioni, if you're not familiar with his work, is a phenomenal author that writes about culture accountability, trust, and vulnerability. And he has a wonderful expression that says, imagine if you could get all the people in your organization rowing in the same direction. Regardless of your industry, you can dominate any industry at any market against any competition at any time. Now, how on earth are you going to get everyone rowing in the same direction? First, you have to know what direction you're heading in. So organizations with exceptional culture deliver on these areas consistently. They have employee purpose and brand. Again, this is how we're attracting, motivating, and retaining our top talent. There's an organizational area of trust. Trust and accountability go hand in hand. Learning and development opportunities. People don't want to stagnate in their positions. They want to know that their employers are willing to invest in them. They want strong and consistent and trustworthy leadership. And last, two, they truly want recognition and reward. And keeping in mind, reward is not always monetary. Sometimes it's a day off, which I recognize can be monetary on payroll, but it's not looking for exorbitant change. And number 7 is environment. Make sure that the environment that you and your team are in is supportive, healthy, clean, and inspiring. So let's talk about accountability, because it's the area that you'll most want to focus on when growing strong, healthy teams and strong, healthy cultures. Back to Patrick Lencioni, this is his model called the 5 dysfunctions of a team. At the bottom, you'll notice that the foundation is trust. Why is at the bottom? Because when an organization has an absence of trust, there are a concealing of weaknesses, a hesitation to ask for help. They jump to conclusions. There's a failure to recognize and tap into each other's skills. People tend to hold grudges and they dread going to meetings. However, in a positive culture with a trusting team, they ask for help. They accept questions and input. Again, we want a collaborative environment. They give one another the benefit of the doubt. They're willing to take risks in offering feedback and assistance. That's something called vulnerability-based trust, is being able to offer the feedback that helps someone else. There's a focus on time and energy and important issues, not personal politics. And they look forward to meetings and getting others to collaborate as a group. When you've got a foundation of trust, teams are more willing to get into constructive conflict. Conflict is simply this. You have lively and interesting meetings. You extract and exploit the areas for all team members. You solve real problems and you don't let them linger. And you minimize politics and put the topics on the table for discussion. When people are afraid of conflict and they avoid it, they have very boring meetings. Nothing seems to get done. They ignore controversial topics because they think it's going to be too critical and personal. They may fall in to the opinions and perspectives, not the facts, and they waste time and energy with posturing and personal management skill. So when we talk about constructive conflicts, we're wanting to make sure that you actually address issues head on, open and honest. Third in the middle is commitment. When you have a lack of commitment, you have ambiguity. And with ambiguity, you're going to have someone who's going to be not as productive. There's going to be a lack of confidence and a fear of failure, revisiting discussions and decisions again and again and not making progress, and encourages actual second guessing instead of being clear. When a company and a team and organization have a clear and trusting and positive environment, the commitment will behave in clarity around direction. And when clarity around direction means you're not going in the opposite direction or fighting against the original agreements. It will align the entire team around a common objective. And these common objectives should be weekly, quarterly, annually, and beyond. They have to be the same. They're developing an ability to learn from our mistakes. This is where we remind ourselves that we're human. You take advantage of opportunities before competitors do. You will move forward without hesitation, eliminating that second guessing, and changes direction without the hesitation or guilt. Moving up to accountability, teams that have a lack or avoidance of accountability, they typically create environments where resentment among team members who have different standards for performance. The standards for performance needs to be uniform and consistent. This will also then encourage mediocrity, missing deadlines, and placing undue burden on team members who actually are the sole source of accomplishment. Switching to the positive, when a team has a strong amount of accountability, it will ensure that poor performers will feel pressure to improve. It will identify potential problems long before they become problematic for the rest of the team. It will establish respect among team members who are held to the same high standards. Nothing grows a better, stronger culture than establishing respect amongst team members. And last, it will avoid the excessive bureaucracy that around performance management and corrective actions. At the very top of this, of course, is results, which all of our teams are looking for is better, faster, or bigger results. When members of a dysfunctional or team that have toxic culture, there is stagnation and a failure to growth. It's rarely defeating its competition. It encourages team members to focus on their own personal success and not those of the company. And people find that they're very easily distracted. Switching to when there's a positive culture, teams can retain the achievement-oriented employees. Achievement-oriented employees is so critical, especially in today's marketplace. We don't want to lose our top players. It will minimize individualistic behavior. It will enjoy success benefits from the individuals who subjugate their own goals, and it will avoid all those distractions. So what Lencioni talks about in the 5 dysfunctions of a team is you can have certain levels of dysfunction at the bottom and still get results, but it'll be much more effort and a lot more friction. And so when you have a trusting environment, it makes things much more simple to get into the conflict when necessary, keep your commitments, grow accountability, and achieve better and faster results. We move on now to steps for maintaining a great culture, because now you've actually built your culture out and you've shared it. So here are some steps. Starting at the top is, if you don't already have core values in your organization, it's time to establish them. And we'll go about that in a moment of how you do that. Next is going to be knowing what your core focus is. Understanding your target market, which is critical so that we're not chasing the wrong markets. In the center, we have to have a clear 1-year, 3-year, and 10-year plan. The last being a BHAG. It has to be a big, hairy, audacious goal. It's the rallying cry that's going to keep employees engaged and bring on the top talent. Then we need to show everyone exactly what their role is and how they are contributing to the success. Again, not asking them to do it but because we want them to see how they're contributing to the overall success. Then you need to begin measuring your incremental successes on a regular basis. All this energy and effort, growing accountability and growing great cultures is going to feel futile unless you have an actual measurement of success. And then finally at the bottom, everyone needs to celebrate the wins together, not just off to the side that they did it or the top leadership did it, all of you did it. So let's move on by each step. Core values, if you don't already have them, you need to look at who are your top performers and what are their shared attributes. Then what do you do with the core values? Sure, you can go ahead and make them into a poster, but what I encourage teams to do is use your core values to hire. How do you filter out and show who you want on your team? You want to make sure that you're inviting in the right people. Core values are also how you have to fire people. Let's admit it, it's not easy to do, but sometimes the best decision you can make is eliminating someone from your team. Recognition is critical in strong and healthy cultures. Employees want to know that they're contributing and not just a number on the team. Reviews. Most people I've met in my practice only do annual reviews based on salary changes. What I encourage my teams to do is once a quarter, review all of their direct reports utilizing the core values. How has your direct report demonstrated the core values in their role? And last is reward. When it is time to do rewards, you'll know that you've got the right team and they're adequately performing and contributing to the financial successes. Then we're going to move on to what is your core focus. It's critical that everyone on the team understands what is the reason the company exists. Is it to make widgets? Yes, but is it to solve a problem? Phrase it in a way that everyone can understand and wants to be passionate about. Then ask yourself, what is it your niche? What is it you do better than anyone else in your marketplace? This will become another lens by which you pass decisions through. Are we chasing after making products for the wrong industry? Are we building out our inventories for the wrong clients? So when we know what our core focus is, we know what we're laser focused on, and then we make decisions about where we can say no to things as well. Moving on to your ideal customer. For those of you who are in sales or marketing, you may have already established this, and if you've not, everyone needs to know who their ideal customer is so they're not wasting a moment chasing the wrong ones. 3 simple areas to ask. Demographics. Who are they? In other words, what is it they're looking for? What is it they're buying? How do they buy? Third is geographic. Do you serve clients all over the world or just here in Northeast Ohio? Where specifically are you willing to travel? Where do you ship? Where is your service area? Where are your products needed? And third, and most importantly, is your psychographic. Simply put, what do your customers value about you? Think of it in terms of the ideal client needs and wants your products or services, is right in the perfect location that you don't have to ship terribly far. And last, when they get the invoice, they never question it, and they've never questioned when you have to do a price increase. These are the 3 combinations to create your ideal customer. And when you've got someone who's a potential customer who doesn't meet one of these criteria, chances are they're not an ideal customer, and you'll get more headaches trying to keep them happy than you will your regular ideal customers. How does this affect culture? Simple. You're maintaining your integrity as to who you are, and you're inviting your customers to be just like you are. You want them to be just the same in similar shared values. Then we have to talk about vision. We want to have a compelling story for both our current employees and those that we need to attract. So where exactly is the company going? Where is the 10 years, or how far out into the future are we looking? What will it look like? What will my role at the company be? In 3 years, do you have a picture? Will we have a new distribution center, another plant? We need to hire 10 more people. In one short year in 2020, now 11 months away at the end of the year, what will we accomplish in 1 year? How will I be contributing? What is my role? And being able to ask all of your direct reports so they understand how they're contributing. And now coming down to the ground is, what's the next 90 days going to look like? If each of you worked for a publicly traded company, you know that every 90 days you need to report your numbers. So if you're not publicly traded, you have to still understand what is your short-term, 90-day, quarterly must get done. And you do the fewest possible things exceptionally well, and you'll execute and look back and see how much more you're getting done each year. But sharing the vision is critical, because if the vision is not shared by everyone, it's going to be pulling the team along versus the team helping you push things along. Let's move on to what happens with the vision. Does everyone in the entire organization know what it is? And how do you share it? Teams that I work with, I encourage the leadership teams 4 times a year, again, to announce where we've been, where we're going, and how we're going to get there. Go back through each of your direct reports and remind them, do they understand their role and how they're contributing? Because when there's a culture of contribution and collaboration, people will find they're doing greater contributions. They'll be able to use some of their discretionary energy to actually execute more in their role. Ideally, we're going to get everyone in the right seat, rowing in the same direction, going back to that image of the rowing boat. So accountability for each individual level begins with, do you have the right person actually executing on their role? We call it a seat. Do they understand the function that they must execute on? This becomes a question about communication. Do all of your direct reports know exactly what they're responsible for or accountable for, how you want things done, when you want things done, and what does done or success look like? And third, do they understand the responsibility they have for contributing to the success? Investing in this level of clarity will grow accountability and create a better culture for you and your employees. Now, our inspector over here is going to be asking, have you inspected what you expect? Simply put, have you set clear measurables? In other words, what are your goals? Set a weekly goal for an activity-based measurable. Number of sales calls, number of widgets produced, number of accidents avoided. number of warranty claims, number of invoices over 45 days, whatever the measurable is most important to your organization. Set it to a weekly goal and then measure against it. Most importantly, you need to assign one owner to the goal, because if more than one person is responsible, really no one is. Then review it weekly within each department and go over it and say, am I on target or not? This will grow not only accountability, but it'll let you see things more clearly, because if there is an issue, you can resolve it more quickly. Going back to the 5 dysfunctions, you want to make sure you've got a trusting environment that can raise issues and say, something's off in my measurables and I need help getting it fixed. Then we want to move on to what can you possibly expect when you're starting to talk about goals and culture and accountability. First, an increase in collaboration. There's going to be a period of adoption. People are going to be onboarded and welcomed onto this. You're inviting your team to start changing the way they execute and how you do things. There's going to be a necessity of repetition. There's an expression that says, if you haven't said it 7 times, you haven't said it the first time. So you need to be repeating what it is you expect, what your goals are, and what your core values are, and how you do things specifically, your unique way at your organization. Consistency, bringing up the example again of making sure that leaders are not being made or held to a different level of accountability, or in some family-run companies, making sure that different last name doesn't get an exception. And last, you may expect some resistance. There's going to be those people who just don't want to change, are not wanting to get on board with any cultural changes or accountability changes. And that will become an opportunity for more communication, hopefully some training, and when really becomes down to it, an exit, because those who are resisting the change are holding the rest of the team back. So on the head is going to be the results you should have, is please remember to share the vision 90 days at a time, 1 year out, a 3-year picture of painting where this team's going. And last, whether it's 10 years out into the future or beyond, give your team, your organization, a giant rallying cry goal that's bigger than anyone can see, so that everyone knows there's an opportunity to grow and share it. Use your core values, not just as a poster, but as a hiring tool, as a mechanism to review how your team is doing every quarter, as a recognition to point out how well people are participating and executing and demonstrating your core values, and how they are building a better culture from it. Share and update your tribal stories. Think about the time that you first joined the organization and found out from the legacy employees how things used to be, how comparison to what they are now, and how you're sharing the best practices we've ever done, or the first time we ever had something bad happen, and how the team responded. Tribal stories are critical for growing a strong and healthy culture. And finally, measure your progress. A lot of this is going to seem like a lot of work until you recognize how far you've come in 1 short year's time. So whether it's those measurables of what's getting done on a weekly basis or what got done over the entire last year, inspecting what you expect is critical for growing accountability, trust, and a great, healthy, and strong environment. And finally, share your successes. So many times teams only get called into a conference room when something went wrong. Use the advice of the appreciative inquiry theory, which is let's go share what went right and celebrate it. It's time to really think about how it's pulling everyone together and not just single eyes that only one thing went right. The books I've referenced today are some suggested reading. The first is called Traction. It's written by Gino Wickman. It is a textbook style approach to the entrepreneurial operating system. You can find downloads of it. For the chapters, it's also on Audible. The second book I recommended and referenced is Patrick Lencioni's The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. It's a rather short read and will help you address team dynamics that help you build a vulnerability-based trust, a stronger culture, a culture with accountability that brings about stronger, better, and faster results. I thank you so much for the opportunity to meet with and present this to the Women in Manufacturing group. I'm grateful for Lisa's time today, and I welcome any of your questions.
Thank you so much, Kimberly. As a reminder, if you'd like to submit a question, please type it into the question box in the right-hand control panel at this time. Okay, since there are no further questions at this time, this will conclude today's program. Thank you so much, Kimberly, for your presentation, and thank you for everyone for joining us today.